Call the May 6th meeting of the Eugene Water Development Board to order. We will begin tonight's meeting with an agenda check. Check with any of the commissioners or staff if there's any adjustments to the agenda at this point. Seeing none, we'll move on to item number 2, which is items from board members and general manager. We'll see, anybody want to say anything?
I'll just, for the record, I don't have a laptop this evening because my Mac decided not to honor Teams anymore with the operating system, so I'll get that fixed tomorrow, but I've got the paper copies, I'll be done.
Good. All right, with that, we will move on to correspondence. Or Frank, did you have anything that you wanted to say under board members or general manager?
The only thing I'll mention, commissioners, is that this is a National Drinking Water Week. And so feel really fortunate to have a great drinking water source and great staff who are managing and good stewards of the assets related to drinking water. So that's the only thing I'll mention under that category. As far as correspondence, if you want to move on to that, there were 5 items of correspondence in the background materials for the board. Some of these routine items, such as the renewable portfolio standard. This is a compliance report that we do for the board annually. The first quarter results were part of that correspondence. The first quarter really getting launched into the year. And so we'll do more of a complete report out on the where we're at relative to the goals and the performance at the mid-year check-in after 6 months. There was some information on proposed charges and fees. These are fairly routine that will be coming up for board action next month, not including the forecast for a new fee beginning next year. Jason, I don't believe is available this evening for the legislative update. He wasn't feeling well today and did not have a voice. And so if you do have questions on that, we'd be happy to follow up with commissioners. And then the final item was the annual update, kind of a situational awareness update on where we stand with the Willamette treatment plant and some of the pre-design work there and some updated information relative to the CIP and long-term financial plan.
Good. Rob.
Thank you. Water treatment plant. I was at the beginning of that. We started at a 68 million and now we're $160 million. And I, in good conscience, cannot move forward any further on this until we know exactly what this thing's going to cost and how we're going to pay for it, because every 1% of a rate increase is only $400,000 in revenue with water. And so, I don't even know if we have the bonding capacity to do this. And so on our 5-year capital plan and our rates and things, we only budgeted 100 million only. Now it's up another 60. I mean, I'm not saying people are piling on, but I'm done supporting that until we can have a financial plan and know exactly how we're going to pay for it. So I would just like to put something out here for others and see if I get three head nods. I wrote something down. I just want you to provide further details and get approval from the board on a financial plan before finalizing plans, because to design this is 10 million bucks, 15 million bucks at least. We've got to get a 30% design so we can know what the costs are. We to take it out to a contractor and say, give us a bid, we have to have a 30% design. Not opposed to spending that money, but I'm opposed to spending any more money. And also, when you report back, I'd like to know what subs treatment plants costing them. They're building one on McKenzie right now, because this got to stop.
I'm going to let Frank respond to that, and then we'll see about a head nod or if you want more information.
Yeah, Commissioner Brown, I appreciate your request. I was just going to interject. I don't think you need 3 head nods. This is something that we believe is important. I think it's prudent and a fair request that we take a deeper dive into the financing plan and into the impact analysis that this kind of expenditure would have on our rates going forward and what alternatives we have to mitigate that. So I don't and unless someone else on the board halts me in midstream here, I think it's a prudent thing for us to do for the board and for the community to understand that. We do believe this is an incredibly important project, and it's one that has a lot of justification to it, but we appreciate the fact that there's financial impacts here that we need to better assess. In particular, before we appropriate or commit to larger spending on the project, I think that's a prudent thing to do. I would request, since we will likely bring to the board some kind of contract around the design this summer, that the board, I would want to request that the board approve at least the 30% design level, so that we can understand the specifics of the design and construction going forward. And then we can create some kind of toll gate at that point after the 30% design. So that would be, I think, also a prudent thing to do.
Can I just finish? I want to make sure that we continue our efforts to get the land use approvals, because that's wheel is in motion. And if we, if this is perceived as we're not doing this, that's not going to work in our best interest. There will be some public facility there, but it's so continue our efforts to help get Springfield, Lane County, and Eugene to give us a land use approval. But by this statement doesn't mean we're not going to build it. We're just going to figure out if there's a better way to do it, or another way to accomplish this goal. So I will continue to support my efforts with elected officials to get that done.
Yeah, I think that's important, Commissioner. Not just the land use piece, but all the permitting, environmental work that goes along with it. We appreciate you and the board's support there. Like I said, we think it's an important project, but we have to understand the impacts financially in greater detail, and what options we have there before we move forward. And if I would just, if the other commissioners.
Yeah, I was going to say, does anybody else want to weigh in on this? I have a question, but I would yield. I guess my question would be, ballpark, what are we talking about to get to that 30% design thing? I mean, what is the we're in so far? And then, I mean, is that 2 million?
I believe, and I can verify this, but I believe that the budget for the full design was about 9.5 or 10 million. So it would be some percentage of that. I don't know if it's exactly 30%, but it would be on the order of that.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Other questions from commissioners regarding this? And then
and you'll have the specifics around that likely in July or August.
Okay. Yeah, that would be the other question, the time frame that we'll be seeing this back before us. Okay, anything else on correspondence? All right, thank you for that. Next, we're going to move on to public input. So public input, EWEB is a non-for-profit organization whose charter is to deliver drinking water and electricity to our community. Although this forum is not used for an open back and forth dialogue, commissioners and staff value hearing from diverse perspectives and receiving community input. Speakers are asked to keep their testimony relevant to EWEB business and request that everyone share their comments in a productive and respectful manner. Should speakers and our audience members become disruptive, they may be muted and or be removed from the meeting. So when your name is called, you'll have 3 minutes to provide your comment. The public input session is now open. And we will start with, we have a couple of people who are on the phone and calling in. We'll go to them and then we'll go to the people that are in the room. So the first one up is Cade Naughtington, and he may not be here. He submitted this quite a while ago. Okay. If he calls in during the meeting, or during the public comment, we'll do it. Next one up is Kathy Ging. Kathy, if you could unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Kathy, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Okay, thanks. Yeah.
Yep, we can hear you. Your 3 minutes starts now.
Okay. Kathy Ging. Today I talk about smart meters, fires, explosions, and the proposed imposition of fees on those wise ratepayer owners who chose not to have radios turned on last year. 2,000 people, from what I understand, do not have their radios turned on. Thousands of fires have occurred worldwide in the last 15 years since wireless smart meter build-out began. I sent you for the second time today a fire report free online, Discovery and Science of Smart Meter Fires, Introduction to the Discovery of RF Radiation and the Related Breakdown of Electrical Wiring Insulation Leading to Fire Causation. The 1.9 million acres of Oregon forest burned last year, I think probably the worst in our history, and we have scarcer water resources and yet more causes of fires, not only due to rising temperatures, but also to lithium-ion batteries being used ubiquitously. Mainstream news locally missed the California fire in mid-January. In the largest battery storage center in the world, 100,000 fires exploded in Moss Landing, California, which is also the site of America's salad bowl, where over 70% of all vegetables, including salad greens, are grown that are sold in the United States. Smart meter build-out has used a huge amount of money in ongoing firmware and software. Another problem is that electric vehicles, including scooters, have caused fires. 700 fires in New York City alone in the first 6 months of 2022. Some people died, including children and first responders. And I myself do not want tenants using electric vehicles that are charging in the house if they're not there. So there are huge problems already. Regarding the $20 imposition fee for those people who are really, a lot of them have been harmed by this technology. I wish you had been on a phone call I have been on for 5 years, every Thursday for an hour and a half for 5 years, and where I heard the stories of people harmed by smart meters, cell phones, etc., which is really a poisonous and visible radiation. And so I'm asking you to not have the fees be that high. I think it should be $10 or $12, which many jurisdictions have had. And I really think you need to go back to our original passage when Dick Helgeson was on the board and held the banner to have opt-in. Mean that you didn't have to have, you could opt out fully without having a meter. And I do want to say that Mr. Cassidy, who been in the EWEB board for several years, he passed away recently. And if he hadn't lived next to Dr. Paul Dart in East Eugene and known what integrity Paul Dart had, who came out against the smart meters, we would not have had this whole friction about the smart meters take place in the last 10 or 12 years. Thank you for your time and your service.
Thank you, Kathy. Next up is James Garfield, followed by Joshua Korn.
Hello, my name is James Garfield. I'm strongly opposed to the fees as well. I do a lot of reading and research on the topic as well. And I choose not to have the pulsing happening in my house. I don't know how many times a day it's pulsing and communicating. I know that's probably privy to the company that designed the meters, but I choose not to do it because we feel better. We feel the ill effects. A good book that I'd like to recommend is The Invisible Rainbow, A History of Electricity and Life by Arthur Furstenberg. To get a full detail of it, I'm not going to be able to accomplish or describe some of the effects that we are feeling from all of these invisible forces that are around us at all times at this point. And one of my main concerns is, and I noticed she brought up that, to change the fee to $10 to $12, I get that there's been 100 years of EWEB being able to read meters for 100% of our community for businesses and homeowners. And we're down to 2% of us that don't want that smart meter or that constant pulsing. So I don't understand. I feel like the fees, you guys have already reduced them by 98%. And there's always going to be a cost associated with doing business. I'm in the business community as well. So I think a fair solution, maybe if you don't want to have people going around and reading the meters, is offer the customers that don't want to, and I know there's a few, only a couple % of us in the community, an opportunity to upload a time-stamped photo. I just did that recently with my passport renewal, and it was a wonderful, easy process. In fact, it was the easiest passport renewal I've ever done in my life by uploading a photo. So I know things keep, moving along, and I understand, wanting to simplify and get rid of costs associated with business with all the other things that are going on. But I think that would be a really smooth and fair operation, to do that. I mean, I'm happy to do that once a month for you. It takes the guy about a minute out there to look at the meter, take a photo, or write down the number and do the water. So, and I'm also appreciative of the services that you provide. I mean, I just hiked Clear Lake last week, and, for our source of primary water. And grateful for the quick service and response that you guys all provide. But I think this fee is not fair for all of us, and the few percentage of us that do not want that constant pulsing going on in our homes. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Joshua Korn, followed by Victor Olbeck.
Yeah, I also oppose this opt-out fee for the smart meters, and I can't help but reflect on the history of how this whole thing came about and how we were initially sold this kind of bag of goods with these smart meters, that they were going to be this massively efficient system that was going to save us all so much money and save you guys all so much money. Yet what did we see? We saw increases in rates at the same time as the smart meter infrastructure was implemented or forced on us. And I mean, that was your choice. You didn't have to increase rates at the same time as implementing these meters, but that's what happened. And so while we might blame our increased fees, our increased costs of electricity on the actual smart meter overbilling us, there's no way to really know whether it's just because you guys increased rates at the same time. And, on the other side of it, all this increased efficiency, I seem to recall reading in your 88-page report that you provided to us that there was a $50 million in public data information. That was a revenue stream, I believe, like based on the report, that you're acquiring from our data. Yet you still seem to be edging for this this nickel-diming us few people that oppose this technology for an opt-out fee, which is, I mean, going to bring in how much revenue? Nothing compared to, if this is accurate, that this $50 million presumably for selling our data that you're acquiring through these meters. And I consider it theft personally. This is our personal data, and it's well known that this is part of a monetization process of this metering technology. So I'd like to hear some answers as to exactly what that $50 million is, and if it is indeed revenue from our data, then why don't we get some of that back? And we could use some lower rates instead of a constant increase in rates if you're monetizing our data. Thank you.
Thank you, Victor, followed by Rachel McInnes.
Yes, good evening. I'm in Ward 2 for what it's worth. And I want to thank Vice President Mindy Schlossberg for providing me with information, which I'm going to quote here. And she said that there are now 20 meter readers for 2,000 customers. So I guess in a month, 1 meter reader would read 100 meters. My question is, as the others have said, for decades, there was no charge for the meter readers when everybody had an analog meter. There was no financial loss. But since the smart meter rollout, EWEB wants to charge for this now. Why is this being done? You have not stated an actual value for the budget for analog meters in 2017 versus 2018 budget for smart meters. Also, budget for the hardware, the relays, the software. And EWEB is a nonprofit. It's a publicly owned utility. So I was the treasurer of several nonprofits for over 20 years. And we always had to make that 990 report at the end of the year and break down all the line items and put it up on the web and send out people so they could see what was going on. I don't see that when I go on the EWEB website. And that does not seem right. I bought in 2014, that's 10 years ago, an analog meter for $35. This is a lot less than the 3 smart meters that were installed where I live in less than 8 years. And I got the figures from Mindy, $76 for the meter. In 2022, there was a census meter, it's $115. I mean, that there's roughly, $200, $300 right there. Now, in addition to this $30 connection fee I pay every month, which was $10 10 years ago in 2015, the connection fee. I've never heard of a connection fee every month. You connected once, you're connected. But you don't pay a connection fee every month to the phone company. And you don't pay a connection fee every month to Comcast. Okay, so why is it you charge a connection fee? And I lived in Europe, Boston, Washington, D.C., Seattle, New York City, Richmond, Indiana. I never had to pay a connection fee. The bottom line is we are not being told the exact cost of smart meters. And I think, therefore, there are all these new fees being instituted to make up for the loss. Thank you.
Thank you. Rachel, followed by Alfredo. That's it to her. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. The second page is from me.
Hello, I am a citizen. I live in Eugene who opted out of the smart meter and then had my analog meter removed without my permission while I was not home. Since then, I have experienced extreme sleep disturbances and difficulty breathing. I also have 4 children and a husband in the home. Now the signal is turned off, but the smart meter still creates dirty electricity, as I hope that you are aware of, in my entire home. As you probably and hopefully know, dirty electricity is pulsed electromagnetic radiation. So it can cause numerous health problems such as insomnia, tinnitus, memory problems, elevated blood sugar levels, and many other health issues. Long term, everyone will be affected because the fields of these meters they affect our cells, our hormones, our metabolic processes, and our DNA. There have been thousands of independent, non-industry funded scientific studies that have shown the adverse health effects of the smart and digital meters, including cancer, ADD, and breaching of the blood-brain barrier. The bursts of RF radiation emitted by their antennas is considered by the World Health Organization to be a Class 2B carcinogen. Now, please show me the scientific evidence that smart meters are safe for humans. You cannot, because there is no evidence to show that long-term exposure to radiation and dirty electricity does not cause adverse health effects on humans. Some of the other major concerns that I have are the privacy issues, which were stated earlier, about gathering our information for data, the costs, where Smart meters typically overcharge and inaccurately represent usage when compared with the reliable, accurate analog meters. And in addition, I've been paying for my manual meter reading for years, but suddenly I have to pay for additional fees to continue to have my meter read. I would just like to say again that residents should have the ultimate authority to decide what technology is installed in their homes, not utility companies whose government protected monopoly prevents residents from choosing a competing utility provider. So I'm requesting that my wireless meter be removed and be replaced with an analog meter. Please give me the choice back. I live next to a person. We share a wall. He's on disability. He has opted out because I asked him to protect our home and family, but he cannot pay the $20 increase that you guys are asking for. So please make this fair and do not increase the charges. Thank you.
Thank you. Alfredo Gormanzano, followed by Danny Patch.
You finally said my name right. So everything everyone said before me, I will put that into my speech. You know, it's been interesting when my smart meter was installed in my house and it was broadcasting for the first, 24 to 48 hours, I couldn't be anywhere near it. One of my neighbors up the street just spontaneously said to us when I was talking to a neighbor on the street, hey, do you guys have smart meters on your house? I can't be in my backyard anymore since that thing's been put in. And I advised them about the opt-out to get the broadcasting turned off. I noticed that after mine was installed, at a certain moment, I felt better. And I went outside to look at the meter and it said opt-out on it. So I know I was feeling the broadcasting from it. Now, as far as the charges, again, we have been paying for many, many, many years, me since 1999, for people to be coming out and reading our meters. If you guys want to pay me $20 to go read a meter, I'm happy to get out of my car, look at it, write it down, and move on to the next one. But I don't think they're being paid that much. Plus, the switching over to automated meter reading, where you don't send someone out, means less people having work. And what does that mean? More people on unemployment, more people on social services, more people on things that the funding is being cut for. So I too am going to say, please knock out that $20 fee, especially for low income people. And interestingly enough, at an event I was at this week, one of you, I'm not going to say who, showed up and sat behind us as we played music. And the person that was sitting right in front of you, the musician, as soon as I walked in, she said, I just got this notice about a $20 fee to read our meters. What can we do about that? I said, well, come to the meeting. You know, it's hard for her to get places. So anyway, there's a lot more opinions and feelings out there than you realize about not having smart meters in the first place. I'm part of a group on Facebook called Hilo Happenings over in Hawaii. And they were talking about how what used to be called HELCO, but they decided to change their initial to HECO, Hawaii Electric Company, was putting on smart meters, but they had the option of paying $30 to get their analog meter back. We would love that same option. I'd be happy to pay $30 for my smart meter if you guys haven't already gleefully taken sledgehammers to it. I know you did that out in the back after you took them in. But anyway, really, we would love our analog meters and not have to pay for this expansion of system that we did not want or ask for. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Danny Patch, followed by Stephen Baker.
Hi, Dan Patch. I am here to speak about this increased fee, but we have a bigger problem. EWEB administration constantly and the board of directors constantly lies to the public. We were promised we would never be forced to have a smart meter if we accepted the preliminary plan to implement it. We were promised that. Where does the promise stop? Does it stop after 30 days or does it stop after 2 years? We were promised. And we know EWEB is a money-hungry monster who refuses to give up. They'll constantly think of new ways to nickel and dime us. We're tired of this. When are you going to stand up to them and tell them to start tightening their belt? When are you going to look for our interests instead of rubber stamping everything that they want? They sit up here with contempt. You set up this room so that we're not even really a part of the discussion. How about a triangle for sakes? Because they're talking to you, but we're not part of it. We can't even hear what they're saying because they're mumbling and they refuse to speak up. How about open up the circle here so we can be part of the process? But we know that you don't want us to be part of the process because you have nothing but contempt for us. I've reminded you this in the past. My brother died of electromagnetic fields. 3 independent surgeons confirmed that to us. Same thing. We purposely did not prompt the conversations to find out what was wrong. We let them speak. They're brain surgeons. They all came up with the same conclusion. I don't care if the government says, oh, it's not real. Well, the government lies every day. We know that already, don't we? These are serious health issues. My brother's dead from it. Literally dead. Diagnosed on his 50th birthday and 3 months later, dead. You tell me they're not real? And by the way, we were promised we would never be forced to have a smart meter. Promised. When does the promise stop? In my book, it never does. I want the board of directors to stand up to these thugs and start telling them to tighten their budget and look for ways to do things more efficiently and stop paying people millions and millions of dollars to do things that perhaps we don't need. You have failed at your jobs. Your job is to protect us, not to prop up this little sideshow. We're mad because you've lied to us. You haven't kept your promises. And you continue to let this thug take advantage of us financially. It'll be something else next year. It'll be a constant draw. Do your job.
Thank you. Stephen Baker, followed by Isaac.
Hi, my name is Stephen Baker. I've lived in Eugene for the last 50-something plus years, been around a while. I know some familiar faces from some other city commissions. I'm opposed to the currently proposed manual meter reading fees for customers that choose to opt out of smart meters, your AMI, and Advanced Meter Infrastructure Program, for a number of reasons, which I'll outline. Number one, I think the proposed fees are excessive and punitive in nature. Compared with other publicly owned utilities and private utilities, EWEB would have the highest opt-out rates in the state and the Northwest, with the exception of Portland General Electric. And I provide a list below, and I'll expand on this in the future. Number two, there is no consideration for low-income qualified customers, seniors, disabled, veterans. Other utilities offer lower rates for low-income customers for opt-out. 3, there is no consideration for customers with severe electromagnetic hypersensitivity syndrome, EHS. Scientific studies by European countries estimate that 5% of the general population suffers from EHS, and some of those have severe symptoms. And number 4, there is no concern about meters in fire-prone areas. Los Angeles wildfires have created renewed concerns about AMI meters causing fires. And I'll give some examples of opt-out fees for comparison. Emerald PED opt-out fee is $12.50 a month. Meter change is $95. Lane Electric Cooperative, the monthly fee is $15 and the meter change is $0. In Lane Electric, the customer provides meter readings monthly with a penalty if they don't, and the utility reads the meter once a year to verify. Pacific Power, monthly fee, $10 a month, meter change $0. And they also instituted a couple of years back an equal payment option plan to lower that price. So where the meter is read every 4 months and estimated between readings, and the monthly fee for that opt-out option is $3 a month. And again, 0 change for the meter change. Pacific Gas and Electric. This is the big California electricity, not PG&E. Meter readings, all monthly fees, meter readings take place every month, and the monthly fee is $10, and the meter change is $75. However, after 36 months, 3 years, all monthly fees are discontinued. And they have a program for income qualified, which is a monthly fee of $5 and a meter change of $10. I'll let you read the other two or three on the back there. But the point is that with the exception of Portland General Electric, which has very high opt-out fees comparable to what you're proposing, everyone else has lower, and they're actually trying to lower those for customers. Thank you very much.
David. Isaac is our last speaker.
Evening. I was reading through the documents related to the upcoming BPA decision. And I want to thank you for all the work going into that. I'd like to voice my support for the options that preserve local flexibility, which I understand to be the load following max or the blockless shaping. The document made it hard to understand the distinction between those two, but I feel like I did understand that the largest cost difference between the worst case and the best was maybe only $1 million or something like that. If a megawatt of peak power is worth $2 million on the open market, it seems like that's a great place to focus on and keep our local flexibility. And I think the document rightly identifies that energy efficiency is a great place to focus on that. I'd really love to see time of use pricing, maybe some western facing solar. We've got thousands and hundreds of thousands of square feet of public buildings, and I think there's an opportunity there. The document was a little fuzzy. I feel like there's a lot of good work that's going into this decision. I know it's a big one. And I feel like the document should reflect how much work has gone into it. It seemed like it could use some more editing. I'm not sure who the audience is exactly. There's, of course, tons of jargon that is somewhat unavoidable, but it was a little wordy and I felt like could have benefited from some more editing time. Section 4.2 notes that we have the option to switch plans, but it's not, it seems like we're making a big decision that's going to be a 20-year plan. So just helping us understand even some of the basics, the 1,000-foot view on that would be helpful. And lastly, in terms of that document, why we included the business model change if it's not even being considered was hard to understand. Anyway, thanks for all the work on that, and I'll keep following along.
Great. Thank you for your input. And thank you to everybody who came out tonight to testify. I know that we're kind of on the edge of town here, and it's kind of a crapshoot. Sometimes you come out here and it's pouring rain, and tonight you come out and you're sacrificing a beautiful early summer evening. So I appreciate everybody who came out tonight. With that, I'll open up the floor for any comments from any commissioners or our general manager. Seeing none, then thank you again for coming out. Let's find my agenda. Sorry, folks. Second. All right, next on the agenda is the approval of the consent calendar. Consent calendar A.
Pool number A5. Pool number A5.
Okay. I would entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar minus A5. Second. All in favor? Aye. Okay. Commissioner Brown, would you like to speak to item 5?
Well, I had a pre-meeting question and I appreciate your answers, but $300,000 for DEI, when we just went through it, and the ability to do for another 2 years, a firm that's got 4 years experience out of Los Angeles. I still think that we can do this in-house because we're going to try and do it when we're due to pricing, you know, and things like that. I still think we have the talent on staff to do this, and $300,000 is a lot of money. And you know, it's $100,000 a year. I know you could have gone the route and just slipped this right under the $100,000 threshold, but thank you for not doing that, because I'm going to keep track of this no matter how I end up on this boat. But I have trouble. I mean, there's 12 people. So I've been here 18 years. I've never seen 12 proposals on any bid. And this thing is, you know, the metrics and what you're asking for, to me, it's analogous to saying, how long is a piece of string to a consultant? It'll never go away. And I'm sorry, but I still think we have qualified staff here that we're already paying, that we could slip this in and use it when we do our rate making case and things such as that, and save $300,000 or $500, because it's $300 for 3 years, but you have the extent to move it another 2 years. So that's $500,000. So I'm going to have trouble supporting this.
Other comments from commissioners or staff? I guess the only thing I would ask after hearing Commissioner Brown's comments is how time sensitive is this? Could you get back? I mean, I know we got a little bit of a prefer in our responses to the questions. I guess my question would be, if he's that concerned about it, is there time that we could look into it more? I'm not sure. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, Commissioners, I appreciate Commissioner Brown's questions and in particular your question also around the time frame. I'll have to double check if there's any limitations to the procurement process, which I don't think there would be in this case. I think there's a balance here between what we're trying to do. There's the board passed SD 23 in 2024, I think it was 2024. And part of that implementation, well, I really do believe the policy is a good one. There is a certain degree of expertise in the implementing of that policy. There is the option, though, given the time frame, and I think this is something we could look at, to segregate the work a little bit differently and understand that in a little bit more detailed, a more refined way. And so I guess what I would be comfortable with is looking at this in a little deeper fashion. This is only committing to the first year. There were 4 areas of work that were pretty well defined, and we could dive into those. Some of those have to do with the refinements we're making around rate design. There are refinements that we're looking at relative to improving our customer support programs for limited income, for example, and making sure we're understanding the equity impact of some of those, as well as our conservation and other programs. So there is a need to do it. The role of internal versus a consultant is something that we can have some discussions around. If the board is willing to allow staff the time to do that, which I would like to be involved in that assessment. I'm unfortunately not going to be at the June board meeting, so that's the first board meeting I will have ever missed. But it is likely that we could follow up on a discussion in July if the board wants to go that direction.
Thank you for that question. And one of the reasons that I brought that up was the fact that Commissioner Carlson is not here this evening, and this was one of the things that I feel that she really helped shepherd along, and so I would love to hear her voice on it. So if it could be postponed, that would be something that I would lean into for that reason, and just to get more information on it. Yeah.
And Commissioner, I just wanted to make sure that in looking at this in a little bit different way and segregating the work, that commissioners understand that this is an important issue to staff and to the public. And I am not taking that, and I want to make sure commissioners are not trying to portray that this is not an important issue, that we have to look at how best to move this forward, taking economics and staff talent and the opportunity cost if staff were to work on this versus something else. And so looking at this a little bit differently, I'm not taking as a lack of commitment to SD 23, our DEI policy.
Thank you. Mindy.
I feel this was something that the board instituted. This was important to the board. We approved this board policy, and I do think it's hard to do this kind of work internally without somebody from the outside kind of taking a look at the systems you have in place and what's going on, because when you're in an organization, you only know what you know in the organization. And so I think this work is really important to have some experts come in and help with that. So I know we're going to table this for another time, but I just want to say that I am in support of approving this contract, and I think the work is really important.
Yep.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I am in a position to support this, but I'm happy to table it if that's the desire of this board. I think that we have made this commitment already, and just not to echo my fellow commissioner here, but also to highlight that former AGM Rod Price had shepherded a lot of the DEI policies in the past and has now since retired. And so losing that leadership and that administrative expertise, I think, is also a huge loss, and really bears a need to have an outside consultant, an outside party to come in and really take a look at everything. So if the desire of this board is to postpone and have all 5 commissioners and have a really intentional look at this, I'm happy to support that, but I also I'm ready to decide on this and vote in favor.
Mr. Brown.
Last comment, and I'm not against CEI at all. And you're right, but you just kind of helped make the point. We had the expertise at the table. I still think we do. But $300,000 is a lot of money. 500,000 is a lot of money. We got $46 million on the consent calendar tonight alone. 15 million for one contract and 13 million for the other, plus all the other projects. And we've got all these rates. You hear what these people are saying about $10 and $20. And we just raised rates 15%. And this thing, this is, we spend this money and then we say the rates are going to go up to cover. And if we can save several $100,000, I want to save it. I'm going to do everything I can. If we can't, well, I got to at least make that effort. And, and I'm kind of a big, I like to hire local, and, for $3,000, we missed a contract between a local firm and a Los Angeles firm on this, if you look at those numbers. And so I know that we don't give criteria to local when we're awarding contracts, but something that could be more interactive, and we're not paying a per diem or whatever, because if they're not local, they're staying in hotels, or we're going to do it over that. But it's just that effort. My old saying, death whack out, 1,000 cuts. Rates are going to go up. We have a $60 million cost overrun on something. It's not a variable. So I appreciate you doing that. And if you want to table the date certain or table indefinite, and I think the rules say one or the other, and they're not debatable.
So what I would say is I would ask you, since you were the one who brought it up, if you wanted to table this consent calendar item to another month, or if you would like to put it back onto the consent calendar.
It's the will of the group. I mean, I've tabled a date certain. I can just make that motion to table this to a certain date. I know that Robert's rules say that once we do that, it's not a debatable issue. We just do it. And or if you want to just keep it open, Mindy, I'm sure Sonia will weigh in between now and then.
I have a question.
Yeah.
If we were to vote on it and it didn't pass, could you bring it up again? Or is that the end of it?
So there are a number of pieces. Well, it's an interesting question, Commissioner. The 98,000, which is really the commitment here, is below the board threshold. And that would be managed within the operating budget of the organization. The reason that this went through actually a very robust process, there were requests for information in last year, a request for proposal, which goes beyond just the numbers and locations. It's the talents and experience which this firm had, in particular relative to working with utilities on things like rate design. We are obligated to fulfill that board policy as we go. We chose to bring this forward because it was a substantial amount, and felt like it was something that the board had directed us to do, even though it was below the board threshold. So likely would not bring it back if it failed this evening. However, the work needs to continue, and we would find a way to manage that work.
To put that back on the table?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right,
To have clarification of the motion, is it,
to approve it.
you want to vote on it tonight? Okay, that's fine.
So Commissioner Schlossberg moved to put the agenda item 5 back on for approval. Is there a second to that? Second. Okay. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Opposed?
Thank you. All right. We will move on to consent calendar B. Is there a
Move to adopt consent calendar B.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, next we have items removed from consent calendar, and that would be highlighted by management for discussion. Consent calendar B, item 13.
Yeah,
Yes,
hi, Commissioners. This, for the record, Travis Knabe, Chief Information Officer. And so just because of the number that was on here, really wanted to just talk through a little bit about what we're trying to accomplish with this consent item. And so I don't have a what this is not, and I probably should have. What this is not is asking for any additional dollars. The 15 million here is in the long-term financial plan. And what we are asking for is to be able to leverage a handful that are listed in the consent item of cooperative contracts to purchase anything from mice and keyboards, servers, storage, some of our cloud hosted services, laptops, and the reason that we would like to do that this way is we want to take advantage of other organizations that have gone through the RFP process, have negotiated terms that are attractive to EWEB, and we get to take advantage of the volume pricing. So as an example, I believe one of the contracts is for the state of Texas, and EWEB's permitted to then purchase off of those contracts, and it streamlines our procurement because if we were to not leverage, the alternative would be for us to go out and do an RFP for many of these purchases to get our own contracts. And so we really want to take advantage of the work that other organizations have done. A little bit of history. Back in 2020, the board approved a $15 million consent item very similar to this, allowing us to use those cooperative contracts, and wanted to just mention that we stayed within that threshold. Also would like to mention that we didn't increase the number from the last 5 years, knowing that we've moved some things to the cloud. We also know that there's inflationary pressures, potentially some tariffs that might impact technology equipment. And we're hoping that the work that we've done to move some things to the cloud offsets that. And I think I would just wrap it up with that, just really wanted to explain what the effort of this work is. And so I would just hand it back to you for any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Questions from commissioners? The only thing that I would say is just because we give you a blank check for $15 million doesn't mean you have to spend it all.
Absolutely.
In the vein of Commissioner Brown over here. Just because you have the authority doesn't mean that we would like to see that all spent in the 5 years. It'd be great if you could keep it to 10 or 5. It was something that I would hope for.
We will do our best.
So I think we approved that when we did the whole consent calendar B. Is that correct? I think we did. It was on there.
Yeah.
So, okay. Thank you for the information. That's something that we've been doing lately on some of these larger ticket and more complicated consent calendar items. And I really appreciate the breakdown of those types of things. Yes, Frank.
Yeah, President Borowski, this is just a quick point of order. I'm not sure that you actually voted on consent calendar A, and Ann is shaking her head. Doesn't believe you actually voted on consent calendar A. So,
okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Ann.
Because we pre-pulled the item that Travis just presented on, I believe that needs to be approved separately from consent calendar B.
And that's what I thought.
Okay.
Even though it was printed in there as consent calendar B, it was pulled by staff instead of by the commission. So with that being said, if I would entertain a motion to approve consent calendar B number 13. Second, any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. All right, next on the agenda is page 2. Customer service policy, future manual meter reading.
Yeah, commissioners, good evening. This is really an item that we put forth as an agenda item specifically for awareness, and knowing that the purpose of this particular item is on the agenda is not to reevaluate EWEB's policy decisions or implementation around smart meters or the specifics around opt-out, but to recognize that for some period of time, we have recognized that there would eventually be a fee for the manual meter reading option. The reason for that is that the total costs of the metering program, as well as the benefits of the metering program, are and will be incorporated into the standard rate base, which then pulls out any additional specific costs associated with the manual meter reading itself. That's why there is a new fee that we are proposing go into effect when we have full deployment, which is next year about this time. And so these are the initial numbers that are cost-based. We expect those to evolve a little bit over the next year, but wanted the commissioners and the public to understand what was the basis for those calculations and those charges, and then also why that was not included in the rate base, which is really covering the both the benefits and the costs of the technology itself. And so it's really an awareness issue. Commissioners had any particular feedback, we welcome that either tonight or as we go forward, and look forward to any thoughts you might have.
Turning upward people, so to read a meter up in Vida, Walterville, up in those areas is going to cost us 4 or 5 times more than it's going to do here. And we've been trying to get to the equitable thing of DEI. And I know we charge people to pump their water up the hill, and it costs us 14% more to provide electric service to people up the river. Are we going to charge people? I mean, I'm just thinking if it's a certain amount locally and there's a scale of economies, we know who these people are. Are we going to do a cost of service allocation and find out? Because if we have to run one 4-wheel drive truck all the way up there, it's going to cost us a ton more than it is to do it here. Are we going to differentiate there?
Yeah, Commissioner Brown, I think the simple answer as far as differentiating upriver is yes, on 2 fronts. One of them is we plan to bring back for the board's consideration the potential to have an upriver rate, given that the costs are significantly different. And as you point out, there are other areas where we have differences in the cost base. And then we'll also evaluate the cost of some of the specific fees and whether it would warrant a specific manual meter reading fee upriver versus in town. So both of those, while separate, they do highlight the cost causation differences in that part of our service territory versus in town. So yes, we'll take a look at that.
Other comments or questions?
I do. I have a comment. So I know that there's people here tonight that are really upset about this and feel really strongly about their meters. But we've made a decision to deploy smart meters. That was our decision as an agency, and we have allowed people to opt out, so it's not communicating. I know that's not exactly what you want, but that is the direction that we've gone. And I do feel that because we're only looking at a small slice of people that would be opting for this, that it wouldn't be fair to then have all of our customers cover that cost. And I know that's not what you want to hear. And we're not voting on it tonight, but I just want to say that is, I do think it's fair to pay for something, a service that's different from everybody else. And we're really trying to make sure when we look at our cost of service analysis, that it's fair, that people are paying kind of their fair share.
Thank you.
The one thing I'll also mention, Commissioner, is that there was a comment made about a potentially different rate for limited income qualifying people. I think this came up relative to actual rate design itself, that our approach as an organization has been to have a standard rate across, separate from what Commissioner Brown mentioned, but across our entire customer base. However, looking at our limited income support programs as separate and from those actual rates has been our approach. And so we'll continue to refine that. We do have a goal this year to take a deeper dive into the effectiveness of those programs, and that's where and how we cover limited income support is through a separate program.
Thank you. Other comments, questions? I guess one of the questions that I would have is, I see, the fairness issue that Commissioner Schlossberg brought up. But then I noticed, some of the other models that are out there in the community, in other utilities. How closely have we looked at other models at this? And is that something that may be appropriate before we implement these fees?
Yeah, absolutely. We have looked at some of the other programs, and before we come back with a fee, we'll have a comparator chart like we do with a lot of things, and that'll be part of our presentation to the board, some of the details that we work out, as well as more detail on the specific cost categories there. So yeah, you can expect to see that.
Great. That'd be something that I would look forward to seeing. I mean, this is kind of just letting our customers know that this is coming down the pipe. We haven't set, because it says these dollar amounts and these fees, those haven't been passed. They haven't been approved by us as a board. Hopefully we'll look at more things in the future and be able to come up with what we feel is fair and equitable to all of our ratepayers.
And one note that will be a notable difference in some of the comparators we looked at is EWEB is both water and electric. And an electric meter obviously different from a water meter relative to the degree and intensity of which you have to support it. And so some of the models might be just one or the other. And so we'll have to work on some additional detail there.
Great. Thank you. I look forward to that. Any other questions or comments on this agenda item? All right. Thank you very much. Item 9, City of Eugene fire fee and EWEB's billing and collection. Anybody leading this? I'm leading this?
That's you.
All right. Well, as many of you know, there's been an effort in our community with the City of Eugene. They have a significant budget gap that they're trying to address. The City Council came forward with a fire fee that was designed to mitigate that gap. Subsequently, that ordinance got referred to the ballot by a citizen referendum. Since then, the City Council has directed the staff, the city manager and staff, to look and see if there's an alternate path forward. That what that could be would be a new ordinance that may change the name of the thing. It may change the mechanism that it's being charged at. In the past, it was going to be based on square footage of somebody's occupancy. And so city staff is working on coming back to the City Council with an ordinance, a proposed ordinance in the next couple of weeks. A work session on the 14th and a work session on the 17th. One of the things that was directed was look at a shorter time period. The other fee was it had no end date. The direction was to look at a shorter time period. And that's kind of where it falls to us. Because if it were for a shorter time period, 2, 4, 6 year type of implementation, it would not make economic sense for them to set up their own billing system. We discussed it at our work session a little bit last month, and I sent some questions to the general manager and staff as to what type of mechanism could be used to help facilitate if we were to put this fee on our bill. What would be the easiest? What would be the best? What programs or things might be interrupted or delayed by us doing that? We got a background or memo on that. Since that, I've also heard that some of the mechanisms that we thought might be easiest and best may not necessarily work. But the programs and the services that are being proposed to be cut by this budget reduction strategy that has been presented to the city's budget committee and the city council affect our community in a lot of ways. So for me, if I can help to facilitate a remedy to this as an EWEB commissioner, I would at least like to have the ability to have staff work with the City of Eugene staff to see if there is a solution that we could come to for a way to implement the fee on our bill. And I know that is problematic for a number of reasons. As an EWEB commissioner, I have pause about that, because I know that when a community member gets their EWEB bill, they see it as their EWEB bill. They don't necessarily break it down to, this is the city's stormwater, this is the city's wastewater, oh, this is the city's general service fee. They just see the EWEB at the top of the bill, and that reflects on us as a board and as us as an entity. And so I don't take it lightly. I know that this is a big decision, but for me, some of the issues that may happen if this fee doesn't go through or this alternate pathway doesn't happen, to me, it will be damaging to our community. Whether it's a protracted campaign fight, or not fight, a protracted campaign to see what is going to be on the ballot or not. So I brought this forward. I'm hoping that we can have a robust discussion about this. But I would hope that we could give staff the ability to work with the city of Eugene to come up with a possible solution to see if we could put this on the bill. So with that, I will open it up for John Brown.
Surprise. So you know where I stand on this, and I think Commissioner Schlossberg said it best. Meeting, she talked me off the cliff a couple of months ago about the question is whether or not we're going to put a non-EWEB related commodity on an EWEB bill. And to me, the services we provide are not optional. They're not like a library. They're not like a swimming pool. They're not like anything else. They're not optional. You have to have electricity, you have to have water, and you don't have a choice. And you heard the testimony tonight about 10 or 20 bucks. We're talking about putting this on an EWEB bill, and then we have every people are already on the edge, and we're going to lose light heat, it looks like, and that's 50% of our low income subsidies right now. I think if you look at the HUD budget, it's gone, so we lose that. But more importantly, do we want to shut somebody's electricity off? A single mom with 3 kids that's making a choice right now between food and utilities because of this fee. I do not, and I will not. There's no way. I'm not going to solve the city's problem. You go back and look at the budget committee. They had the option to address this. There is no way that they're looking down 2 years from now to solve this. None whatsoever. They're just raising money, and I'm not going to support it at all. I will write. It's not the money. It's putting it on the EWEB bill, and that's it. And we've got our own problems. We've got big problems. We got huge problems going upward rates. And whether it's 2 years or 4 years or whatever, it still doesn't make it affordable to people. If we say, well, we're only going to bill you this extra money for 2 years, that doesn't make it affordable to the people that can't afford it. So I am adamantly against this. The city can come up a way with doing this. I don't want to see the services gone either, but there's things they can cut still that aren't that effective. They're putting $1 million in new parking meters downtown. There's all sorts of little things that they're doing, and it's the optics of it. So I personally am totally opposed to putting this on the EWEB bill.
Indeed.
So again, I want to take this away from the specific fire fee that's being proposed and look at the issue of putting something else on the EWEB bill. And I guess I just have some questions about would it be possible to separate this, if we agreed to do this, would it be possible to separate something like this from the EWEB bill? So that's my question. So somebody gets their bill and their electricity and their water is listed, their stormwater fees. I realize that the stormwater fees are linked to our electricity and water, but if somebody couldn't pay their full bill, maybe this was answered in the backgrounder, but I just wouldn't want them to be penalized with their electricity and water because they couldn't pay the whole thing. So I don't know if there's a way to kind of separate them out. Maybe that's too complicated. I think what Commissioner Borowski was saying was just he supported directing staff to kind of look into it a little bit more, to work with the city to kind of explore some ideas. I think that there's just a lot of unanswered questions. I'm also curious, how much would we charge the city for this service? Would we charge them for this, and how much would that cost? So I think that I would just like some more information, and maybe that information needs to come from our EWEB staff working with the city staff to kind of hash out some of the details or some of the particulars of what that would mean.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. To provide a small reminder, I do, so since this is on the ballot, both city staff and also EWEB staff can't discuss at length or provide significant, I was going to say significant detail, but that's not quite accurate, but also can't weigh in too deeply. And so I have some questions as well of exactly what this would look like. Is square footage the best mechanism for this measurement, or is there an alternative form that can be used? And I am in support of us directing our staff to be able to ask those questions and have them answered. I believe wholeheartly that our partnership with Eugene is a very critical one, that we are in a unique position than most other cities, that their utility is just another department of the city and we operate independently. And I think that provides a lot of positives and also provides some negatives, including in this moment in which there is a rock and a hard place in multiple rocks and multiple hard places happening at the same exact time. And so I support directing our staff to explore options with the city of Eugene. And I think also from city staff that every month that there is a delay of some type, it's something in the realm of about $1 million of lost revenue. And so I know that their budgets are required to begin July 1st. I know that they are anxious to have an answer, whether that comes from our community or from the council themselves or what have you to be able to address these gaps. But I share that same anxiety. I think that that we have been asked and that the city deserves a chance to have a response from us. Thank you.
Tim, can I ask you a clarifying question? So you want to direct staff to, you want EWEB staff to determine if it's best to do a square footage or sewer impervious surface based on stormwater? Is you want our organization to make that determination of what's the best way to do this billing?
As a direct response, yeah, just to, so city staff is coming forward with proper proposals, and also as Commissioner Borowski was mentioning that that there is a potential new conversation that's coming about coming at this conversation in a different light. So we don't know what we don't know, and I think providing staff to the city council to be able to discuss those conversations and what it might look like to put it on our bill. That's our question that we have to answer here is how will it go on our bill? If
Frank, do we have this time to do this? I mean, and expertise, or do we have to contract this out?
To do an evaluation, to see if there is a mutually beneficial, workable way, we would not need a consultant for that. We may need to, as part of that assessment, work with consultants on any particular implementation of something. So just looking at if there is the details, there's a lot of details associated with how this mechanism might work, and we would really have to work closely with city staff to determine if that's practical and workable. But at that stage, we would not need to likely contract out.
But we could tell the city whether or not it's better to use impervious surface versus square footage.
Yeah, we can work with the city and their staff to figure out what the billing determinants would be, as we would kind of call them, and then the collection process as part of that. I think as mentioned in the background material, there's also some legal implications here as well that we have to pay attention to. So it would be along the lines of what the billing determinants, what the mechanism would be like, and then what the collection process would be like.
Thank you. Yeah, it's my understanding that getting the data points to match, you know, who lives in the city, connecting with EWEB's data points as far as, you know, how we're billing. If we can make, there's a way to make those mesh, and looking at different metrics that might get there, and giving the city staff and our staff the ability to look at all options and then come back to us and say, we found a mechanism that may be amenable to us, or that may be a work that could work. And then we could look at that and say, okay, we can do that. But until we have the mechanism and the ability to say, we can do this or we can't do it. You know, there may be a way that we just can't make it work. And that is the question that needs to be answered. The other question, or the other part of that, is absolutely, I would want all costs that are incurred from this, if we do move forward with billing, would be covered by the fee that is being collected. And that was something that was put forward even at the initial fire fee ask when that went out almost a year ago. So I would imagine that would be definitely part of the fee.
Could I ask one last? I'm sorry.
I was just gonna respond to you. I don't think that it's EWEB's job to tell the city this is the best way to calculate how the fee should be. I guess the thing that I'm suggesting is, if this isn't already happening, I think it would be good for EWEB staff to be available to speak with city staff so that whatever proposals they're talking about could at least be feasible, right? So I don't want some big expensive like campaign or something that's going to happen and it's not even feasible. So I think that our two organizations need to
Oh,
talk.
I have no problem with them talking, communicating. I mean, just thinking the logistics and their workload and everything else and all the other things in front of us. And I think about things like 22,000 customers in River Road. They're not in the city, but they're our customers. And can we easily separate those in our billing? And you know, I mean, there's going to be a lot of things to think about, and you squeeze the balloon and it's going to go a lot of different ways. And it's upriver customers and people in the urban growth boundary, all the nonprofits, the University of Oregon, every one of them. And so it's a logistical, it's a huge Herculean task. And I just want to make sure that my direction to staff is to stay on water and electricity, reliability and affordability. And I don't want to have to take on other people's costs. Sorry, city.
Right? Any questions or?
I do have
more
a question
direction?
around the timeline.
Yes.
Do you know what the city's timeline is on this?
It's pretty advanced. They're planning to have a work session on the 14th of May. And then if there is direction from the city council to keep moving forward, there may be an ordinance that is proposed on the 21st of May. An ordinance would have to go out for a public hearing and then come back to them for a vote. So the soonest that all could happen would be the end of June. But it would be, yeah, that's the timeline that has been set forth for in front of the city council. Not that we would need to implement it by then. That would just be the direction. And what has been put out there publicly is that it's a 3 to 6 month implementation timeline. Was the first one that was put out there by our staff to their staff when the fire fee one was put out there, that it would be a 3 to 6 month type of time frame. And that's where Commissioner Morris's talk about it costing $1 million per month. That would be if they were to gap or bridge fund to the thing. What the city manager said was that she wouldn't be willing to bridge fund unless she knew the bridge was going to land someplace. And so that would mean an alternate ordinance. Yes.
Just one other clarification that I would actually request of the board would be, if going through this process with the city, we'll be evaluating mechanisms and trade-offs between the different billing components and collection components. It is likely that they'll need something from us before this body meets again? And is the board comfortable with us providing different levels of detail and trade-offs to the city of Eugene outside of this board meeting again, which will be, early June? I guess I'd want to get clarification around that.
I think that this is just my take on the schedule that would happen. I think that there would be an opportunity for us to give a thumbs up or thumbs down at the June meeting. Because it will be in the window of the public hearing that they're going to have. They won't be able to enact it till after our June meeting. So if we said no, the chances are that would have an impact on whether or not they would enact that ordinance.
Just a clarifying question. So the ballot measure that was referred by the Chamber of Commerce is going to be voted on in November no matter what?
No,
it's not.
The city council has the option to rescind that ordinance at any time.
Okay, and then so that's not voted on. So then they put another one out. Is what they're proposing to another thing to the vote to the people, correct?
No.
So this is just a fee that nobody votes on.
Well, they could put it to the ballot, or they could just enact it as an ordinance as they did the last one. And that's a city council action.
Yes, that just brings up the question, can they always just enact fees and we have to collect them?
We don't have to collect them.
No, this is optional.
This is with the board decision. My understanding, this would be a decision of the board to authorize the general manager to put this on our billing and collection system. So any other questions from staff before I ask for some direction from the board?
I just want to make sure that we're clear on what parameters we're working within. You may be.
Yeah, I think I'm relatively clear, President Borowski. What I'm expecting to hear from you shortly, just to see where this goes, is that get consensus across the board or majority to direct staff to work with city staff on evaluating the various mechanisms and trade-offs for a potential city fee through the EWEB billing and collections process. And it's really looking at the mechanisms and the trade-offs of those and working with city staff on that.
That's basically where I would like to have.
And so I'll come out on the short end of that. I still don't want to shut somebody's power off. But they're not paying something that's optional because they have to pay something that's not optional. And if that option isn't in this, I'm so against it. I mean, I'm adamantly against this most thing in 18 years. I've been against more than anything because I don't want to force somebody to pay for something that they don't need, they don't want, and make a choice between water and electricity versus a swimming pool and a library. Because they don't have a choice. Kids don't have a choice. Seniors don't have a choice. And I'm adamant about that there's got to be something in there. If you work with the city, there's got to be something in there. So we're not shutting people's power off because we've just jacked their bill up for a non-EWEB related thing, because you know what where we're headed with rates anyhow. And that's my goal, is to protect the children and the seniors and all the people, the low income that can't afford this.
I suspect that would be, I mean, I don't expect that will be one of the trade-offs that's highlighted. If, to address that issue, that is in the mechanics of things, one of the things that complicates the different options that we're looking at and the legalities of what those options are. So that has to be clarified pretty significantly.
Tim.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, playing in the realm of ifs. So if the voters do decide on this current, or that there is an alternative fee that's proposed, and if we put this on our bill. Two questions, at least with the original fee, and maybe this is a question for you, Chair Borowski. Am I remembered correctly that Manager Maderi had mentioned that there would be a specific carve out for low and very low income people?
Yeah, they were gonna hold back 10% of the fee to help with low income people. And the recommendation was that would the easiest and best way for that to be implemented would just be to dump it into our already existing low income thing, but that's not set in stone. I mean, the 10% I think is an assumed amount. The mechanisms for that is not set in stone.
We're playing in the realm of ifs.
Yes.
And then second is, I mean, I think I already know the answer based on that, but if someone qualifies for the community cares or low income rate assistance, would this fee also be included in that if this is included on our bill?
Your ifs are getting into the complications. How the payments are applied, how late payments are processed, those are all quite complicated when you start looking at more and more billing elements and how the billing elements are prioritized. And that is one of the complications that we'll have to look at.
Great.
And for those reasons, I'll be supporting that motion, just to have that question answered. Thank you.
So would you like a motion at this point, or do you want head nods from what you described? Because what you described was something that I would be happy with.
I'm okay with head nods if people are okay with that.
Okay.
Look, the evaluation of the mechanics.
Yes, John.
Sorry to be the bad one here, but so you're not going to be here next month. Okay, and this is going to get discussed with you and staff before that. And so where are we going to be in July? In this?
I think that's a question for President Borowski.
If things play out in the way that I'm seeing them happening at City Council with the 14th and the 21st, I believe that an action would be appropriate from this board in June.
An action to actually add something to the bill.
To allow it to go on the bill, yes.
When are we going to discuss it? I'll look at our agenda for June. I can give you about 50 questions I'll have. So when are we going to discuss this? This is precedent setting. This is like silt. You know, the ordinance for silt is 3%. Now we're 6%. And we're the only ones around here that pay 6% because somebody did something a long, long time ago. It's never gone away and it never will go away. And better late than wrong. So I just want to know when we're going to discuss this because it's not on the agenda for June.
Yeah, I can work with President Borowski. I think, I mean, the timeframe isn't.
Don't take this personal, but you don't.
No, I'm not taking.
You don't see there's conflict here. He chairs a committee with the city and you guys are going to go discuss this and then you're going to tell us to vote on it in June and you're not here. I have a problem with that. I'm sorry.
No, I don't see that.
Well, I mean, it's not a conflict, but it's a process conflict about, we're supposed to represent, I represent 20% of the city, 25% or whatever it is. You know, we all have a representative. How am I going to go back to a group of people, get their input, and then come back here? If I haven't even discussed it, I have no idea what's coming. And you're asking me to approve something that's going to affect them. And I don't get how I'm supposed to do my job if we're on this short of a time frame. And the city's known about this since 2023.
Yeah, I don't have I don't have a specific time frame, Commissioner.
Yeah. And I think we can work on that. If it takes more time for us to have a full and robust discussion, I would not stifle that by any means. I think that we can get the information back to us and we can discuss it if we feel it's appropriate in June. to take a vote. That may be happen, but if we don't feel that it's appropriate, we can move on. And I will try and work with the general manager to set some time in the June agenda to discuss this issue. Okay, any other comments? And you have what you need from us, staff? Thank you very much. And thank you for the conversation, everybody, especially you, John. I hear it as well. So next agenda item is organizational goal number 1, annual major capital project updates. Aaron.
Good evening. Let's try this. Good evening, President Borowski, Commissioners, General Manager Lawson. It's a pleasure to be here tonight to give you an update on our capital plan for 2025. My name is Karen Kelly, for the record. I'm the Chief Operations Officer for EWEB, and with me tonight is Mike Masters, Water Manager. And we are going to present these updates and let you know that Tyler Nice was going to be here. He's actually at a WEI conference. So we have extra experts online and in the room to help us if you have technical questions that we can't answer. Okay, this presentation is going to focus on type 2 projects to give you a little more detail on the information that you can get from the quarterly report, which is in your board packet. This is for information only as part of the board's ongoing participation in our capital planning and execution. Would point out that in the coming months, we'll be talking about next year's capital planning process. So this really is just an update for 2025. The board plays an important role in the CIP process, and we do appreciate your support and guidance. The capital planning process has a couple of important drivers, which include the strategic plan, specifically around resiliency and modernization, and our master plans. Capital improvement plans take on the prioritized needs from the strategic plan and our master plans and develop projects and plan financing to meet those needs. On the right-hand side, I want to draw your attention to our executive limitations EL1 financial control policy. I'll be referring to as EL1. You guys are familiar with that. It gives us the categories for the types of projects and how we report them to you. And I wanted to mention this because in March, we had some discussion about these changes, and then you did approve these changes last month in April. So type 1 is considered general capital and is budgeted year by year for recurring capital expenditures from January through December. Type 1 includes categorized collections of projects of less than 3 million and typically involves dozens of individual projects that can add up to 3.5 to 4.5 million per year. Type 2 are projects that we have discrete scopes for. They have schedules that can span multiple years, and they can cost over 3 million during the project life. Okay, moving on to how we measure and report progress. This is also defined in the EL1. It includes the maximum level of expenditure authorized by the board, and this slide shows how oversight by the board is important here in the capital planning. So we've got budget, which you have a lot of influence over. You also have some influence on scope and schedule, those being more driven by staff, but also monitored by the board. I would like to point out that we also have staff dedicated in our strategic project management office and continuous improvement program who are working to improve our project management skills and capital planning process to keep us on time, on budget, and with better planning and execution. So more work is happening to continuously improve those processes. Our CIP planning and project execution is not easy. It is very complex. The projects can be discrete or span years, even decades. And some are really more of a program than an actual project. So I would just mention a good example of that is our Carmen Smith capital program. Decades long, a lot of expenditure. On the left, you can see spending over time as a way to determine success. You can see our 2025 numbers where we are year to date. But in this slide, you can also see year over year. But I would point you to our year-end capital report in the quarterly report for that year over year update. That's a good place to see that. On the right, you can watch spending versus budget on a quarterly basis, and note that while the type 2 labels are not specific, they do line up pretty closely with single projects, and these are the projects that I'm going to cover primarily in the next slides. So starting out with electric type 2 transmission and distribution, our primary project is to rebuild the Jessen substation, which will improve transmission reliability and address future load growth in Northwest Eugene. Currently, design and permitting will be completed this year with construction beginning in early 2026. And I would like to remind you that, you know, we do have a rebuild of 10 substations in 10 years. I'm not supposed to say that anymore because we're not sure that we can actually meet that time frame, but that is what this program is about, continuing those rebuilds. Other key work I want to draw your attention to is the Dillard transmission reconfiguration with undergrounding distribution circuits, which will reduce wildfire impacts, as well as the rebuilding of the Hayden Bridge to Walterville transmission line that came down in the 2024 ice storm. Dillard funding is believed to be secure and is part of the FEMA hazard mitigation grant. Note this slide says 1.15 million. That really is covering both the Dillard project and the Hayden Bridge to Walterville. Moving on to type 2 for generation. International paper includes a major generator renewal work for this year. Walterville is focused on emergent work from the seepage in the forebay, which is pending approval of additional analysis by FERC that they have required. And the Lieberg near-term risk reduction measures project, you'll notice, has no spending yet for 2025 because we're still waiting for FERC to approve the drilling plan. All other parts of the project are contingent upon that approval. So that is why you see no spending there yet. For generation in Carmen Smith, I want to give you some updates. You have been hearing all along this year about Carmen Smith, hot topic for us. But a few late breaking things just point your attention to. The generating unit overhaul has been a really difficult project and very complex. But we are making progress, and the second unit is planned to be completed and back online in September. Also, with the debris boom design in the Trail Bridge Reservoir, it is still excuse me, under review by FERC, which could impact the installation for this year. So we are a little bit disappointed in hearing that. But we are going forward with the habitat projects in the Lower Carmen Bypass Reach and Carmen Reservoir, which you did approve consent items for tonight. We have some good news on the load bank project as the bids on the electrical work came in under the estimated budget. But I will warn you, they are still very costly and coming to the board in June. Site clearing is happening now. We are operating the Trail Bridge Dam in low load mode, it's hard to say, to maximize spill for downstream passage for fish, and recreation improvements are happening as we speak at Lakes End Campground and Smith Reservoir Day Use Area. So a lot of progress is happening at Carmen. It's a very busy place if you've been up there to kind of take a look. With that, I'm going to let Mike cover a little bit on water and then we'll continue.
Good evening, Commissioners. President Borofsky, I'm Mike Masters, the Water Operations Manager for the record. Talk a little bit about our Type 2 water projects. For our main work, we continue to work to harden our resilient spine through 2026. The Hilliard transmission main work is projected to be completed by the end of Q2 this year, with a city paving project to follow this summer. Our next big transmission project is the East 23rd 42-inch connector. That's set to begin this summer. That will improve hydraulics in the system significantly. It connects a 42-inch transmission main that has a section of 16-inch pipe necking down in the middle of it. So very important project. We look forward to getting done. Looking into next year, our big project for next year for transmission is the project at our 42-inch riverfront connector down by the U of O campus. So these projects are critical redundancy to the Willamette River crossings and improve transmission of water from base level storage through the rest of the system. Moving on from transmission to the reservoirs, work continues to build 2 new 7.5 million gallon storage tanks at College Hill, with earthwork wrapping up in Q2. Tank construction and tunneling for water main is set to begin in June of this year. As you see in the picture, the footprint of the tanks is starting to take shape, which for some reason is really exciting to me. If you remember walking through the process of building East 40th with us, you can start to envision what's going to be there. So that's really exciting. We're also replacing a failing, those tanks are projected to be online by the end of 2026, the new tanks at College Hill. Getting into the upper elevation, we're also have a project kicked off to replace a failing 1.75 million gallon steel tank at Shasta 975 with 2 seismically resilient 500,000 gallon steel tanks. That is projected to be completed by the end of this year. And with that, we will talk about, the project sponsor for the second source.
So you do have a much more detailed backgrounder, and I can tell from our earlier discussion it has been read, and I appreciate that. So I'm just going to hit a few of the highlights for our second source. Environmental permitting work is proceeding as anticipated with both federal and state agencies. We have been pleasantly surprised by the agency's timeliness and response to us. Recent public comment period with the Army Corps of Engineers closed, and we received no opposition in that comment period. On the land use side, this is a really complicated process, but it has become clear that revisions to the Public Facilities Services Plan, or PFSP, while desired by both Eugene and Springfield, they've made changes to that, and they've split that plan apart, and that is going to delay implementation. So given that delay, we did meet with the Eugene and Springfield planning staff to determine what our options were for moving ahead to get land use approval without that process. And we did learn how to go about that, both with our code amendments and discretionary use permit applications. So we are moving ahead with that, and we have also completed annexation of the property into the city of Springfield. Our projected schedule for the Willamette treatment plant remains unchanged to this point, but significant cost increases, as you have noticed, were identified and will need to be accounted for. The 160 million projection includes the standard indices of 35%, as is common when projecting a project cost increase over time, but also includes specific commodity price changes now pertaining specifically to water treatment plants with specialized equipment. This figure does include a 30% contingency, but it does not include overhead costs. So we will need to reach the 30% design phase to fully understand the truth of the cost and ways to mitigate that cost. And I wanted to confirm that the design estimate for getting that together is 9.5 million. So Frank had that correct. Moving on to some of our shared service work in the capital plan. This is the year of continuous improvement for SAP Season 2. We are working on process development using the new system, including customer notification enhancements, move-in, move-out process, interval data and usage, a mobile app for customers, and SAP Analytic Cloud dashboards for budgeting and reporting. The other piece to this is preparing for Season 3, which will include asset management and field service management in SAP. And to do this, we are working on operational asset management plans with a goal to complete water and electric transmission distribution by year end. That will help with our integration process. We have had some delay due to competing priorities for internal resources. The experts who know these processes are somewhat few and busy, but we are working to make assignments and backfill those roles so that we can keep that project moving ahead. This does include hiring 2 new employees that will be asset management specialists. For our Bertelsen project, you did approve a consent item for phase 2 tonight. Construction will include a new exterior laydown yard with access road, security fencing, site prep, grading, lighting, and associated work. completing the access road between the existing Roosevelt Yard and the new laydown yard and the Bertelson Road. You can see that what phase 2 is including is in the red in this slide. So that project to date amount 2.4 million was what has been spent on phase 1. And tonight the consent was 2.8 million for phase 2. I do want to highlight that we will be looking at future phases after these 2 are implemented, and we, understand that maybe this will be all we need to do. Maybe we need to do more. We will evaluate that as we go, which is why it's nice to have this in phases. But the overall cost is, if we were to do the full build out as shown in the entire slide here, that would be 18 million. And for our automated metering infrastructure, this does span both type 1 and type 2. I did want to mention a few things. So we have been in a pause on mass deployment following SAP go live due to system changes and the need to develop new deployment planning and scheduling tools. Mass deployment is expected to ramp back up in water and begin brand new in upriver during Q3, either July or August. In the meantime, the project team is actively working on the base station installations upriver, which are needed in advance of deployment to ensure the meters can communicate. Most of that work will be done by the end of June, with one station up in Vida taking longer, which should be by early 26. Did want to point out that we have installed 54,000 of our water meters already, so 9,400 is what remains. We assume we will be getting about 1,000 of those installed this year, and the remainder will be next year. And one last slide here is just to cover some of the risks to our capital plan. We have seen some supply chain issues. Some of it is lightening up, as shown. Pipes and poles are a little bit easier to get, less of a lead time. Many of our brass items that we use in the water system is taking 6 months or more to obtain. 3-phase transformers have multiple increase in prices and long lead times. And then we are looking at ways to maintain 1 to 2 years worth of our inventory to try and handle the long lead time items and have them on hand. Labor market is also a continuing struggle for some of our highly technical skilled staff, especially in engineering. Some of our recruitments have just flat been unsuccessful. So we are looking for ways to build that in-house, perhaps with entry-level folks and a new training program. And we do supplement where we can with contractors and consultants. And we have ongoing issues with policy and regulatory uncertainty. So our grant programs have been cut. I think you received a memo from General Manager Lawson about what we're seeing with the federal situation here on May 1st. So we continue to evaluate what we can do about the funding. We're watching the tariff increases and changes and trying to figure out alternatives where we can, and then monitoring resource cuts at the federal agencies, primarily BPA and FERC. We're seeing some delays in responses and planning. I did want to lead with one positive thing about delays. 2 of our regulators at FERC are pregnant, so I support those kinds of delays. One positive thing. I know you have questions, and so we are here to try and answer what we can for you.
Thank you. I will open it up for questions. John.
I'm not going to be negative anymore. So the logic behind doing the Walterville line, if we don't know if Walterville is going to be alive next year, can you help me with that?
Mm-hmm. So we are still doing the analysis on the seismic risks. When we did the return on investment for the liner, we do still have time to recover those costs and still make revenue before the license term is up. So it is still showing that we should pursue relining at this point. Now, depending on how much longer these delays take, that could change.
But that's under the assumption that Walterville goes back online, and we still have to address that 1 in 10 million year flood event thing. And
we still are feeling positive about our ability to address that risk.
So you think we're going to bring Walterville back?
Yes, we are still going that path.
Okay, thank you. And I'd just like to comment, Mike, one of the things I really like about nobody showing up to that podium is to complain about what our water projects, and nobody has ever done that. But I mean, we had a little bit on 40th, but on College Hill, and kudos to you and everybody else involved. that no news is good news. So thank you very much for that project. That's really good to have. Thank you. That's all I got.
Tim?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. I think it was great, very easily laid out. I don't have any questions. I just have compliments. You guys are doing a great job. You are very transparent and it's clear of what you're presenting. I am excited to hear what my fellow commissioners have in terms of questions, but I just wanted to highlight the neighbors of College Hill are also extremely appreciative that excavating is done. And so they share your excitement in that. And I wanted to highlight too the Bertelsen site. And I'm just extremely appreciative of the flexibility that's happening there and the intentionality that's there as well. I just met with support services to talk about this, and I'm catching up. It's been great just to hear that that's the intention is to be proactive and reactive at the same exact time. So I just want to highlight that and say kudos to that. I'm sure I had other compliments to give, but I'll pause there. But I just wanted to say thank you for your work.
Thank you. We'll take compliments anytime.
Indy?
Well, I want to say what a hard time to be doing this work. So I just want to acknowledge that there's a lot of potentially exciting projects, but with the cancellation of grants, supply chain issues, the cost of everything going up, labor, it's kind of a bummer. So I just want to thank you for all of your hard work and also for keeping us updated on everything that's going on. My question is about the second source, and I know that we need a second source, and I know that this cost inflation it's a lot, and especially if there aren't going to be any federal grants or anything like that. Do we have an alternate plan? I don't know when we're talking about it more in depth. Maybe that's the time to really ask the question. So like, when do we dig a little bit deeper into that? That's my question.
So I think that 30% design is going to be the place to have that solid conversation, because there may be some options in the design that could help. Maybe there will be additional grant opportunities. We will also have dug in with finance on what the actual impact is to rates and our borrowing capability. So that's really, I think, where we need to have that hard conversation.
Thank you. That's it.
Great. So I have a couple of questions. On Bertelsen, is that going to be paved? Is it going to be aggregate or gravel? What is, I mean, you couldn't really tell from the rendering.
Right. Some of it is paved, some of it is gravel, and I'm looking online if Scott Milovich, if I can phone my friend to hop on. And if not, I can get back to you.
Yes, I'm
yay.
here. Can you? Yeah, hi, Commissioners. This is Scott Milovich. I'm the Support Services Operations Manager. And yes, the surfaces that you see in that Bertelsen diagram are paved. So we have to be by code to use for the use that we want to have there. The surface has to be paved. There is some planted area there that breaks up the area a little bit, and on the edges of it, kind of in the pink color is concrete, or there would be heavy storage area, and then there's also an area for the heavy equipment training that will be marked out, and that will be not paved.
Right.
But everything you see in gray there is paved.
So with that being said, I sit on a committee at the city of Eugene where we it's a road committee, so we talk a lot about the impact to our greenhouse gases that result from paving. So I know that in public or non-road or public type things, there's an opportunity to use higher recycled asphalts in those things, and warm asphalt as opposed to hot. I would just hope that you guys are looking at that to try and bring down as much, utilize what is out there in the new technologies as far as the materials that you're using when you're doing this. That's just a comment. I'm not telling you anything to do there. Second question I have is on the ability to have 1 to 2 years worth of inventory of our needed supplies. Is that like a budgetary increase? I mean, what was our standard before and what are we going to? I mean, you know, in the past, it was probably 9 months to a year's worth, and now we're going to 1 to 2 years. And what is, I mean, how much sunk cost do we have sitting in the yard back there? And do we have to have any type of budgetary actions as far as that goes?
I'm going to answer that by saying that what we're targeting are the long lead time items, and many of those are highly expensive specialized equipment. And I want to phone my friend Josh Reddick to see if he might have anything to add to about. I know that we have done that with some transformers that maybe we would have just ordered as needed, and now we're trying to keep on.
Used to be about 12 months or somewhere in that range, is more like 3 to 4 years. And so we're not necessarily planning more usage or anything. We have 5 in stock now, and that was a pretty big purchase. So those ones were about 36-month time frame. So no additional spending. I'm not sure how that's managed on the warehouse side of the budget, but yeah, it should change that.
That's great. And I think that's a prudent move. I am in favor of that, obviously. I know you buy it today, you're sitting on it, but in today's world, that is actually advantageous, I think, having it bought in today's dollars and not. Frank, you wanted to say?
Yeah, from a budgetary perspective, and this takes the cash flow side of it out of it. In many cases, these are for capital projects. So the value of the capital is then budgeted and depreciated over time. So from an accounting perspective, that's how it works. Although there's some items that are what are called pre-capped, which means when you receive them, they actually hit the books at that point. And a lot of the larger items that Josh described will tend to have progress payments. And so when you reach certain review points with transformers, for example, you'll make a 30% payment or a 50% payment. And so probably likely over time, if that trend continues, you kind of bake that into your financial planning. But it is diminished in some, or I'll say the budgetary impact is spread over a number of years in the case of capital.
Yeah. And then again, that also is something that is advantageous to us in mutual aid. You know, when there's a huge thing, somebody has an ice storm in Salem and helping out is important. Yes, Deborah.
And I just wanted to add that holding more inventory is not the only way in which we're ensuring that we have the products available. The procurement team is working closely with engineering staff to plan out so that we know what we need out in the future, as well as make sure we've identified alternatives that may be easier for us to get.
Right. And then my last question is, how long until I'm going to be able to put a fishing pole in Smith River? Because those fish have been growing for about 5 years now without anybody having access. Is there any timeline on when that access to that reservoir is going to be available to the public?
I don't know the answer to that, but Lisa Krentz is online. I bet she probably does.
Good evening, commissioners. Could you repeat the question, please, Mr. Frosky?
When is Smith River Reservoir going to be available to the public for us to put worms in there and catch those big trout that have been growing for 5 years?
Very good question. The work on the Carmen unit should be done in September with commissioning towards the end of the year. We have a bunch of testing. So we're targeting the 2026 season for the campgrounds to be open, both Trowbridge and Smith Day Use area and Lakes End Campground. So next year.
Great. Thank you very much. And thank you for everybody else. Any other questions or comments? All right. Thank you very much. We are at item number 11, which is a break. So let's take 10 minutes. Be back at 7:45. Okay, Next item on the agenda is organizational goal number 3, the BPA product initial recommendation.
President Borowski, Commissioners, good evening. For the audio record, I'm Frank Lawson, the CEO and General Manager. Joining me up here are Deborah Hart, our Assistant General Manager and Chief Financial Officer, and Brian Booth, our Chief Energy Resources Officer. And before I actually get started into the agenda, I just wanted to acknowledge the staff, the core team. There's a number of people that have contributed to where we are with the Bonneville decision. Commissioners, many of the people you would recognize, some of them are in the room here, kind of along this side, but the core team, their expertise, their ability to model, their critical thinking has really been outstanding, and really wanted to appreciate their efforts specifically. We're going to cover tonight a little bit of background, a little bit about the initial leaning on the product decision and the rationale. We do have one action that we need commissioners to execute tonight, has a resolution to do with the provider of choice contract and initiating that request. It is not the decision on the product. It is an administrative requirement of Bonneville. And then we have some opportunity for discussion and feedback. A little bit about background has to highlight the journey that we have been on together, commissioners, staff. This probably goes actually well to the left of this particular schedule, a timeline that's up here, all the way back to when we started doing electrification analysis and studies, the 2023 integrated resource plan. We got into more and more information this year around the demand side, energy resources study. We do have really, and this is one of the things I'd really like to emphasize in this presentation this evening, is that we don't have a one and done decision here. I think even you heard public testimony, there was reference made to load following max or load following strategy versus block with shaping. We have a product decision around the Bonneville contract, but also later this year, we have another decision that I'll talk a little bit more about in some of the upcoming slides. We've looked at this decision in a number of different ways. We wanted to highlight that this, yes, it has impacts economically. There's portfolio costs, there's management costs associated with that. There are costs and opportunities related to whether a decision now opens up business model impacts, business model options going forward. Even though there was some comment around the business model not being part of this decision, it is impacted indirectly and over the long term by this decision, and is something to consider. And then a number of different qualitative assessments, whether that be local control, environmental attributes, decision resiliency, what options do we have going forward? Feedback from the community table, for example. There's a number of interested parties here, and we wanted to acknowledge that. A number of different product choices when it came to the BPA product. I know that this is a chart you've seen before relative to the fact that we looked at different sensitivities. Across the bottom on this chart, you see various product options ranging from more of the full service options around load following to different block with shaping. We, over the course of the last 6 months, working with staff and the core team and others, kind of narrowed it down to 2 of the best choices. And these are a choice between good choices. And so we feel like a number of these options are good, but narrowed it down for the most part to load following and block with shaping plus what's called PLVS, which is basically, I'll call it a peaking service for no other reason. There are some qualitative differences between load following and block with shaping. Load following puts a little heavier emphasis on the federal system and the management of that, especially around peaking, and provides some ability to buffer us from the volatility of the market. And BPA is on the hook to hold various reserves, flatten volatility, and you'll actually see that in the chart when you see the whisker chart, and there's a very narrow band around the dot. That means there's not as much variability with that. Block with shaping can create some different pricing signals relative to customer programs, and has some degree of higher resource portfolio management responsibilities as well as opportunities for EWEB. There is some degree of increased cost uncertainty, especially around meeting some of the resource adequacy requirements going forward. Again, this is the choice between good choices. Just to really kind of highlight how the differences would work. EWEB does have a certain amount of resource base on our own. We are such as hydro and wind primarily, a little bit of thermal, geothermal not that I know of yet, do we? Okay, and some thermal resources, biomass, and other things. Bonneville's requirement is to supply a net requirement for us. So we are not a full requirements customer. So their obligation is a net requirement above what our resources, our dedicated resources are. In the case of load following, we are leaning in to Bonneville to a greater extent, especially relative to their ability to meet capacity and meet peak. The federal resource is in particular an awesome resource for that. Relative to the at-cost basis, they can, and I'll try to differentiate between the tier 1 or at-cost opportunity that we have with Bonneville versus the block with shaping, where there is some requirement on us to fill that gap between our varying peak load and what could be supplied as part of the Bonneville product. This is kind of another way of looking at it, and one of the differences in the economics in particular came down to how much of the peaking capacity can be leveraged across the federal system versus how much come from other sources, some of which managed by EWEB. Some of the key takeaways around the variability does go back to, again, some of this, a little bit of this is review relative to what's driving product uncertainty on a product that block with shaping versus a load following. Some of those are listed here. These come down to over the course of, and I think it was mentioned earlier, a few $1 million. Those are a few $1 million per year. Those are their annual portfolio costs. And so those do add up over the life of the contract. As far as the initial leaning, as we're describing it, again, I want to emphasize that this initial leaning is relative to the tier 1 at cost piece, that we can leverage the federal system, and in particular relative to their net requirement on base load, feel like that is an area of opportunity that we should take advantage of. We are blessed in the Northwest to have the access to this capacity while it exists, and at the tier 1 at cost level for base load, that should be something that we feel like we take advantage of. It's the least cost under the expected case scenario, and it's also the most certain, the most stable relative to the different options. There's still some uncertainty from other variability that the other product option creates. Although it was pointed out, and I think accurately so, many of the cost determinants are shared between the two products, but some of those are not. And so that's part of the reason that there is a wider band around block with shaping with PLVS, the peaking service versus load following. We do know that there are ways that we can shrink that variability around block with shaping as to how we would manage some of the local contracts. And so that would come down, and there are ways to do that. Part of the other aspect of the decision was really to create flexibility, intentionality when we start to look in particular beyond the tier 1 level, by leveraging the federal system at the base load tier 1 level at cost. It will allow EWEB to take a very intentional strategic view of our needed resources beyond that. And so it becomes very intentional when you start to look at growth, when you start to look at economic development, when you start to look at managing our own resources going forward. And it will have the benefit of focusing the organization when it comes to looking at the tier 2 versus managing our own resources going forward for things above and beyond the tier 1 level. Kind of what was mentioned earlier around some of the boundaries of the choice is kind of interesting. When we start to think about, and on the far right, you see block with shaping, and then you see load following maximum, load following minimum. The comment earlier around load following maximum, I think was the one where the feedback had to do with local control. This is why we're not looking at this as a singular one and done decision. If you pick any of the load following options, it creates other choices. And so, whereas if you pick block with shaping, some of those choices around how you manage things doesn't quite have the flexibility that you would have in the load following to take on the next level of decisions at the non-federal level. What this means for us is how these decisions would stack up would be moving to load following in the initial leaning in July gives us the ability to then also in 2025 decide whether we are going to go with load following minimum or load following maximum. That has to do with when you start looking at resources beyond the federal system, the non-federal resources. Do you lean into Bonneville as a power marketing agency and our balancing authority to manage that, or do we take that on ourselves? That is something that is part of this number 2 decision here, which we think is important to make because of the expertise that we have developed internally around managing resources. We think it's important to make that decision intentionally within a reasonable time frame this year. I think we have the capabilities to do that. And then over the course of a number of years, and some of this has to do with when you're starting to make decisions as an organization around relicensing hydro facilities, for example, which part and what ownership criteria do you want to have in your own generation? I don't want to say, do you want to rent or do you want to own? To what degree does your own portfolio, and how do you build the rest of that portfolio? And that's another follow-on decision. Part of the part highlighted in yellow there does have to do with the acquisition, specifically the acquisition and the management of the non-federal resources above baseload. And so I think part of the initial leaning, I just kind of want to make this clear, is that at baseload with at cost resources, you lean into the federal system the most you can, which is load following. That frees the organization up to then make intentional decisions around the non-federal resources and the management and acquisition of those, which we know we are going to have based on the future forecasts and the future needs and the future exploration and negotiation of contracts with local resources and actually distant resources for that matter. And so the basis for the leaning has to do with there's a difference here between when you lead into the federal government and the federal resources through the power marketing agency. That makes a whole lot of sense to maximize that when it's an at-cost resource. When you're starting to go out to the market to the tier 2 level or the non-federal level, whether that's tier 2 or our own, is an intentional follow-on decision. Brings us to the resolution this evening, and we'll I'm sure we'll get to this later. The motion on this would be to pass resolution 2509 authorizing the general manager or designee to request a provider of choice contract offer from the Bonneville Power Administration. Again, this is not requesting something specific around a product. This is requesting that they that we're interested in a contract with them. And so it's more of an administrative piece of work than anything else, but we'd appreciate your launching us in that direction. And with that, we'll just open it up. I've got a number of experts in the room, both beside me and all around the room, and definitely wanted to acknowledge their expertise and be happy to answer any questions. Or you just discuss it amongst yourselves and we'll listen.
All right, I will open it up for discussion. Mindy.
So I have some questions and I apologize if some of them are kind of basic and maybe have been gone over before, but so we currently get 80% of our electricity from BPA. Is that correct? Yeah, okay. And then, so under load following, we would still get 80%, right? Because we currently own that 20%, right?
Yeah, the 80% is it's an average over a year.
Yeah.
There is what's called basically a contract high water mark. We're only allowed on an average basis to get a certain amount of tier 1 at cost power. I think part of the difference in this case is they're filling in the gaps that we would still have our base load that goes into that. And then it's not an average, so it goes like this and they would then fill in that. But essentially it is still 80%.
Okay, no matter what we
Roughly.
choose, it's always going to be 80%.
Okay. It could be less than that.
Okay.
It won't be more than that unless we lean in to Bonneville at the tier 2 level, which would be, we would use them to buy market-based or other kinds of resources, which is part of that second decision.
Okay. So there's been some talk federally about bringing back coal and things like that. So is it possible that BPA's portfolio could change?
It's not likely within the horizon of this particular contract. First of all, I don't know of any federal coal resources in the Bonneville portfolio. Their portfolio is dominated by hydro with a little bit of nuclear mixed in. I don't believe that coal will be part of the federal system. I think most of what you're hearing around coal has to do with either independent power producers or some other utility-based organization.
Okay, because my question was, if we have a goal to be 90% carbon free, and either one of these options, we're still going to be able to maintain that.
Yeah, I think so I did a little bit of checking. The Oregon DEQ publishes the carbon intensity has done that for the last number of years. My curiosity was, in a good or a bad hydro year, that affects the intensity of our electricity. In a really bad hydro year, it actually affects us more than it has those organizations that are full requirements of Bonneville, which is hydro dominated, and also nuclear. Those are really sort of non-carbon based resources. Where we will have to be very intentional is when we start to look at growth beyond the base load that Bonneville contractually would be obligated to provide. And then when we start making decisions around additional resource decisions outside of that 80%.
You said if we opted for the block with shaping, that we'd be able to lean into time of use and direct response for rate design. So how does that differ with the block with shaping versus the load following?
Yeah, there is still pricing signals that can come as far as how Bonneville meets peak load, what the costs are during the day. It is attenuated a little bit. So with that certainty, You don't quite have the variability, but there is still the opportunity for time of use and for some of these other customer programs. The exact cost drivers might be attenuated, and we'll look at that. I think one of the primary reasons we would implement those has to do with our own ability to manage growth, which is beyond the tier 1 level, beyond the base load level. Those still make a lot of sense from an avoided cost perspective. And so even though the signal might be a little bit attenuated because we're reducing the variability and the risk, there are still some of those signals that exist, but a really big driver of that is future avoided cost.
And then one last question is, if we did opt to go with load following, would you anticipate that potentially our rate increases would be less over time? Like, is that a driver?
You know, when you looked at, and I'll let you, the economist here going to work. So I think, again, this a little bit comes back to there's two good choices here. You looked at the difference over the life of the contract. You looked at the expected case. The expected case, there's a percentage point here and there over a long period of time. What you won't see is, oh, the contract changes in 2028 and 2029, there's a rate spike or a rate decline. You won't see that degree of attenuation. What you will see is that we will be less subject to volatility in the market for that base load, for example. And our programs will have really intentional design criteria. They'll have sideboards around what we're trying to accomplish with those programs, with those, whether it be customer programs, avoided energy consumption through conservation. I wouldn't expect to see a sort of a student body left pricing impact on day one of the contract. I think this is, and that's reflected because they're both good choices, and how those get realized is sort of diminished over time. But I don't know, do you want to weigh in on that?
Dang it, Frank, you said everything I was going to say. Let me set a couple of bounds on this. And we do have a couple of economists at the table. We're pretty good at saying on the one hand this and the other hand that without giving a definitive answer. But let me give just a couple of statements that I believe are true. The first one is that no matter which product we pick, it would likely be more expensive than what we currently pay Bonneville today. They are premium products, include additional flexibility. Slice block is relatively inexpensive, half a cent a kilowatt hour less expensive, something like that. However, the amount of additional capacity that we would get from this would be very cost effective compared to other capacity resources that we will be obligated to acquire in the future, no matter what. So I do want to table set. We think this will be a stably priced product, but no matter which way we go, there will be a step up in our Bonneville costs in the next few years.
And I would pile on a little bit to that. I think that that doesn't just hold for Bonneville capacity, it holds for capacity in general. I think really capacity hasn't really been fully included in the past contracts and valued like it will be going forward. And so I think that what we saw in the analysis from the team was how capacity is handled is maybe one of the most important things. And we're not saying that we're going to give up local control for future capacity. That's part of this follow-on decision as far as how we want to control that. What we're saying is exactly what Brian said, probably the most cost-effective way you can address capacity and as well as being stable about it in the process is to leverage the federal system's ability to get that capacity while we can get it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just a couple questions, macro, then maybe micro. So our relation, the United States, Canada, and Canada controls the water in the Columbia through a treaty. And I know the treaty wasn't, is there any risk there with, because of our international relationship with Canada and the treaty about affecting our working with Bonneville?
You want to go ahead? I'll answer it too. I can, either one of us. I'll say that the treaty, there's not risk in the sense of it getting worse than it has been. It really, the settlement had to do with an amount of money that was going to Canada. I would equate it to, we'd paid off the mortgage and we were still making the mortgage payments situation. I do think Bonneville has some degree of risk that they have to manage, but it's within the capacity of the system. And I think that's part of their thinking. So I wouldn't expect that alone to be any sort of a particular risk one way or the other.
Okay, when Bonneville does a rate hike, we pass through maybe sometimes 60-70% of that rate hike as a percentage. We don't pass it percentage per percentage. By load following either one of these products, will that change that ratio? So if Bonneville jacks their rates 8%, we're only going to pass through 6%. Will that change that ratio that we historically had and how it affects our rates?
Isn't it?
We don't pass through the full rate increase. We pass it.
We do not pass through the full rate increase. Right. We would still not pass through the full rate increase because their requirement is a net requirement. It's not our full gross requirement. It's going to be restructured a little bit, Commissioner. To be honest, there's some different billing components in the new contract than the old contract, but it will not be a full 100%. Whatever they do, we do. Some of that'll have to be based on the structure of how they're recapturing their rates as well.
So and we have an 80-20, like Mindy just said, and so we got a contract coming up in a year or two with Sierra Pacific. And if we don't renegotiate that contract, if we don't buy their product, how is that going to, will that have any adverse effect on our requirement here? Or are we going to have to go out and replace that and replace new load?
I'll answer that and then you can weigh in too.
Sorry.
An example being the one you use, Sierra Pacific. Sierra Pacific is not a product or not a contract that or a resource we dedicate to load.
Okay.
And so we are not obligated to go replace that of our net requirement. That would not be affected. However, that particular contract, and I'll say beyond the contract, that particular resource could have long-term value for us as an organization that we'll need to evaluate on its own merits. And so it doesn't mean that, and depending on how we want to handle the non-federal beyond tier 1 resources, those are things we'll have intentional decisions around. There may be some things that, and by the way, the contract that we have now and many of the contracts will actually go through 2028. That would be an important date to continue some of these through 2028 because this new contract won't take effect until 2028. So I wouldn't want to say, oh yeah, this one expires next week and let's let it go. We still have some obligation between now and 2028, but the general decision around those non-federal resources that are not dedicated to load, if we have a resource that is dedicated to load, and there's a few of them, there's a finite list of those, then we are not obligated to replace those from a load perspective.
So are that like Harvest Wind or things like that? I mean, any of the ones that are coming up or that may be on questionable, they're not dedicated to load? I'll go the other way. The ones that are dedicated to load are Carmen Smith, Stone Creek, Walterville, Leeburg. There's part of one in Idaho that we have replaced because we sold it. All the others are not dedicated to load. Is that correct?
That's correct. By law, any pre-1980 hydro must be dedicated to load. Stone Creek's the one that's got kind of an asterisk next to it, and that it is officially dedicated to new large single loads, such as the Hynix facility. Since we no longer have the Hynix load, it is a free agent, for lack of a better term, at this point. But yes, all of our non-hydro resources, IP, Harvest Wind, the various contracts, Sierra Pacific, they are undedicated. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for the presentation, and it is very technical. And so
Yeah, Isaac was right when he made comments about there's lots of jargon involved in the report. So we'll get that cleaned up some.
I'm very glad my 5th month here I get to weigh in on this. Cool. Are there any concern? I mean, we just got a memo about changes at the federal level. Are there any concerns with letting go of our own local control and commitments from EPA and those commitments not being met?
So I'll clarify a little bit. We're not giving up total local control. The second phase of the decision has more to do with local control than the first part. I also would point out in either product choice, we're 80% reliant on Bonneville's resource, and these are federal resources that have been invested in through the decades. We and 140 other utilities are reliant, some more than us, on that resource, and so there is some degree of power in numbers. I think also in stating that we have to treat them like we would any super important key supplier relationship, and that's that we have to be active in it, we have to manage it, we have to pay attention to it, and the fact that we have access to this federal resource that has still some capacity left that we want to gain access to, that's very affordable, is important. But I think those are things that we want to make sure we're paying attention to, helping Bonneville in that. We have a lot of people who used to work at Bonneville, have tight relationships still as we manage that relationship. So it's not something that you ignore. You treat it like a $100 million a year resource, and that's the way we have to do it. But either of the first phases of the product decision, I don't think dramatically impact that statement either way.
Thank you for the clarifying my language, and I appreciate that. I think, I mean, and this is maybe an odd question, so feel free to bail on it, but are there questions that we as a board are not asking that you are excited to answer? Excited may be.
I'm not going to punt that. I think that I think there's a number of things that we consider in this process. You know, one of the things of consideration is the intellectual knowledge that we have built up in the management of resources. I think that's an important consideration in the first part of this decision, but especially the number 2 part of the decision, how you manage your resources beyond the Bonneville contract, beyond the base load at cost. I think those are things that we're considering internally. It's an important part of our decision. It impacts not just people, but what people do, and I think that's pretty important thing for consideration. I think through time, I know you've been immersed in this for about 5 months. Some of these other poor people have been immersed in it for a lot longer, and through the course of time have asked a lot of really good probing questions of us. And so I'll give that some thought. I think maybe some, I don't know what to call it, but we wish you would have asked questions for our June meeting. Some of the things that maybe we didn't think that you asked, but we want to tell you. How's that? We want to answer the question without you asking it.
Thank you. Couple of questions. One, by leaning into Bonneville in this way, as heavily as it is with the lowering the risks, does that give us any advantage when it comes to transmission? Because Bonneville is a big player in the transmission side as well.
A little bit. Part of, and I see a little bit. So we are a network transmission customer, and as part of this arrangement, everything underneath the blue would have to be firm transmission from Bonneville. So they are obligated to deliver that electricity, not just acquire the electricity. Under the block with shaping, there is some degree of the peaking service also covers transmission, but there is, I think, probably a little bit of exposure, but minimal. I wouldn't say that was a primary driver of the decision. There's a little bit more surety around the transmission under the load following product option, but probably enough to not really drive the decision by itself one way or the other. I do think transmission, when we start to look at the beyond the federal system, transmission is an important consideration for us. So when we think about a local resource versus a distant resource, that is a real consideration that we have to take into account, given transmission is incredibly long to build. We're talking decades to actually construct anything. It is becoming more and more fully, if not overly, subscribed. Growth is forecasted. The integration of renewables in different locations is also a consideration when it comes to transmission as well as resources. So I would say there's a slight degree of there is a security in it for sure at load following. It's probably not as much of a difference relative to block with shaping that would drive that decision by itself, but it's a little better. It's a little more sure.
Thank you. I'm going to address this to you, Brian. In one of our previous talks about this last fall, you were quite enthusiastic about the product of block shaping with PLVS, because it was like, it was almost like, I can't believe that Bonneville is offering this to us, was kind of the take that I got from it. And I'm going to put you on the spot here. Which product did you choose?
So first of all, let me say
Like
that
the Supreme Court right here, I think.
Yeah. So let me speak to the process just a little bit. We're not exactly a democracy, but everyone did have an opportunity to vote, and then the king decided.
No. We were the king's court.
The king.
Yes. Staff were split roughly 50-50, and pretty much everyone gave a leaning of how strongly they felt, and it was all like, I'm 55-45 this way, I'm 60-40 that way.
Okay.
There was no one who pounded their fist on the table and said, let's do this.
That being said,
so my vote was to do a nuanced approach. There is a whole lot of that band of uncertainty. And sorry, I have cottonwood allergies and I'm feeling it today. A whole bunch of that band of uncertainty around block with shaping was driven by capacity pricing, EWEB's ability to acquire, inexpensive capacity in a pretty short runway, right, by the end of 2028, and uncertainty around the way that Bonneville will price block with shaping. They've never had it before. They have been perhaps deliberately cagey about the ways in which they will price parts of it. And that drove a lot of that band of uncertainty. So my recommendation was to go load following. And should that band of uncertainty shrink, should we find ways to acquire the capacity that makes up the difference, then we would have an opportunity to make a product switch.
Okay,
That's a nuanced position.
I understand that, and I appreciate you doing that. I'm sorry that I put you on the spot, but the reason I did that is because I really appreciate your takes on these issues over the years, and so I just wanted to know that that's why I put you on the spot. I'm not going to be making my decision on that, but I want you to know that every time that I've had interactions with you on this issue, I come away knowing more and having a clearer thing from it. So that's why I asked you that question, Frank.
Yeah, I would. So I appreciate the question. You can ask Deborah what her vote was after this. I think this is one of those decisions where I really appreciate the value that the core team brought in their various perspectives. Brian's absolutely right when you said, well, I'm leaning, and even on this stage, one leaning 58-40 or 52-48, the other is 48-52. There's a lot of nuance associated with it. One of the considerations that really struck me that I'm not sure was in the analysis, and by the way, I did say in my response that it wasn't a consensus issue, but one of the things that really drove my thought process was around organizational psychology and strategy. You cannot, as an organization, be everything for everybody all at the same time. And the fact that we do have the opportunity to leverage a very valuable federal resource, including capacity, while it exists, while it's affordable, allows the organization to stabilize one part of our existence while we really focus on the other decisions that follow onto this. And that wasn't in an analysis anywhere, other than to recognize that there are ways that you can stage this so that at the end of the day, ultimately, we're adding the most value for our customers with the least amount of risk. And that's ultimately just listening to the various core members and which elements they tended to value more than others or place more weight on than others. Eventually kind of walked away with the fact that this creates an environment, the sideboards of which future decisions, both management and boards, can truly evaluate in a way that is unburdened by a past decision.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I know that, what struck out in that comment was we can't please everybody all the time. As in the worlds of politics, which, I mean, we're on the lower rungs of the political ladder, but that's part of the balancing act that we have to deal with every day, is trying to make sure we can please the most people for our constituencies. So thank you for being upfront and honest with us. Deborah, do you want to weigh in on what your choice was?
So my choice was load following. It probably is not a surprise to any of you that I am somewhat averse to volatility. And that is what more than somewhat, that is what initially attracted me to load following. But what really keeps me there is that ability to focus. So that Frank spoke about.
I appreciate everybody who's put in all the hard work on this. And it is a big decision. And yeah,
just a little bit of a caveat on this number 2 item that relates to load following, min, middle, max. There's various degrees that were one of the decisions, the follow-on decisions for this. If we go with the load following product option, will be the non-federal side. It is, well, Bonneville, from my perspective, and this is just a leaning on number 2, if you want to look at it that way. Well, the federal resource is tremendous at cost, tier one resource to tap into. It is hard to see how they add that same value at a tier two level, at a beyond federal resource level. And that starts to lean toward a more heavily involved EWEB in the management of the non-federal, the acquisition and management of the non-federal resources. But that's an early reading on that. And that needs to be proven out intentionally. But it's, well, on one hand, you see there's lots of value. On the other hand, you go, I'm not sure how much value is added in this other world.
Just was gonna make a motion to adopt resolution 2509, authorizing the general manager designee to request provider of choice contract offer from the Bonneville Power Administration.
Okay, so, motion and a second. Any other discussion? Again, this is just one step. We haven't made a decision as to which product we're going to do at this time. It just allows you to go into negotiation and let them know, hey, put us in the queue, correct? Great. All those in favor of the resolution say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. All right. Anything else from staff on this before we move on to the next agenda item?
Thanks for making the motion. I'd forgotten about the resolution, and I'm sure staff was going
I've
to
got it
forget
right
about
here.
the resolution. Thank you.
Excellent. Next item is future board agendas. Anything that, I think I'll throw that to Frank. Obviously, there was a discussion earlier about fitting in some talk about the billing into an upcoming agenda.
Yes, President Borowski, commissioners, looking at the board agenda report, there was 30 minutes available in June. That's with no other changes. There is the potential that you and I and Vice President Schlossberg can talk about incorporating some time around the addition of a non-utility based fee in the mechanism. Even though I won't be present in June, the people that really know the processes in the system will be here. And so I'll be leaning into them, probably specifically Deborah Hart and Julie McGahee and potentially Travis Knabe on that front. So I'm gonna pass that off to them and get out of town. And so and I don't believe Commissioner Schlossberg is here for the June meeting either. So
Question on the June 17th work session. Will you be here for that?
Yes, I will be here.
And you won't be here for that?
No.
Okay.
Commissioner Schlossberg and I have some one-on-one time set aside prior to the July 8th decision on Bonneville to meet and go through the various perspectives so that she's has an opportunity to inquire about what's going on prior to the July meeting.
Okay. Other comments or questions about future agendas?
And just more work to come there, commissioners.
Yeah, and I'll work with the chair or with the general.
I also think that, we'll have to take a look at some of the upcoming agenda time around long-term financial planning, rates impacts, immediate rate structures. I think July is going to be an interesting meeting. Deborah Hart and I've already had some discussions around what the importance of that meeting, but also looking at allocating some time around the second source design and the financing plans for that. I think are going to be important, and we'll have to figure out throughout the summer how to work that information in.
Right. Yes.
So, I still have a desire to get something on the agenda sometime in the next year about the lower river and the stewardship of that. And I want to make sure that doesn't fall by the wayside, for lack of a second.
It is in the queue, Commissioner.
It is in the
Yes,
queue.
it is in the
So-
queue. Is it up at the top or is it actually in a month? Oh,
I didn't get another iteration of the board agenda out, but we are planning to do that with the same timing as the next state of the utility in advance of the watershed fee expiration.
so it's in there. It's in the queue.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Other comments or questions? All right. When do you leave, Mindy? Of May. Okay. And I'm gone the 17th to the 26th of May. So maybe we should have just kind of a touch base, the leadership with you before the 17th of May.
I'll put something out there. We can do
Okay.
that.
Great. All right, board wrap up. Go around the table. John.
I'd just like to thank everybody for tolerating me this evening. I had a little tirade, but I think a good discussion is healthy. That we have different opinions, we agree to disagree or whatever. But I just have my opinions on a couple of things that were on the agenda this evening, and I voiced them. And granted, I came on the lower end of a vote. That doesn't happen very often here, but I think it's good for the dialogue and it's good for the organization, because if we're 5-0 100% of the time, why are 4 of us here? So think about it. Thank you for tolerating me.
Tim?
You're welcome, John. No, of course, I'm glad that we're able to have a discussion, and truly, yeah, I think that this is a really functional and really great board. Yeah, we're talking about a lot of really complicated topics in a really uncertain time, in a really challenging environment, both locally and nationally. So just grateful.
And we haven't mentioned that our upriver meeting is next week, so looking forward to seeing everybody there. And then one other thing I wanted to say is I was somewhere last weekend, and some people who do a lot of social work, they were all talking about EWEB actually and praising our customer service. They work with a lot of clients that have to access some of our low income assistance programs, or just help them navigate through the customer service process. And they just said such wonderful things about our customer service team. So if you could pass that on to them, that they are
I will do
really
that.
appreciated in the community.
I sure will. Thank you.
Yeah. And then just wrap up, I would just say, I did attend the Watershed Council meeting last month, and there have been federal impacts to those communities up there and the partners that are part of the Mackenzie Watershed Council, ODW, the Forest Service, the Corps, all of those people are experiencing either staff reductions, grants on hold, things on that. So that remains to be seen, but it's something that I know that our staff is tracking. But a lot of the stuff that we do as far as our watershed goes flows through federal lands and is part of the federal infrastructure. And so that's something that we're keeping an eye on. And I think that's probably one of the areas where we may see impacts from some of the things that are coming down on the federal side. Even if it's just staffing, it's tough up there, and there's really good people that have lost their jobs, and it's a shame. Yeah,
I forgot to mention that the one-on-one the one that we had with staff about customer care and weatherization was incredibly beneficial for me, and I think for everybody else. But I did see, one thing on the HUD cuts. I saw the acronym LIHEAP going away. That's 50% of our low income assistance, and it was an alarm to learn that 20% of our people are utility burden, and we're only serving 5%. And if that 50% goes away, we're going to have to make a decision on what we're going to do.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that sometimes we look at the summer months. Oh, it's kind of a time of light agendas. I really do think July, August, September when we're looking at limited income, we're looking at the long-term financial plan, we're going to have to roll up our sleeves and make some really interesting choices around some of the impacts here and some of our own work. And because it's our jobs and duties to balance the values that we have, and one of those is affordability. And so affordability to whom and is part of that. And I know we have as a goal to look at the way that we have our limited income programs structured and for what purpose, and that'll be part of a deeper dive there. And so there's a lot of work between when we sort of launch the CIP and the long-term financial plan and when we come out with rates in November, December. That's going to be a pretty intense period for us to roll up our sleeves and look at it.
Okay, well, 2024 was supposed to be the hard year. How come you're making 2025 this difficult?
It was just a warm up, 2024 was the warm up, and now it's the real game.
This meeting is adjourned 1 minute late.